everyone. Thanks for having me. So I'm Serene. I'm from Singapore Association for Mental Health, and we are a mental health charity in Singapore. So we work a lot with the community. So the way I see it, I feel like we are all community workers here, and I think we can relate to each other in that way. Yeah, I have to say I'm quite new to the community that you have here in Heart Safe and Singapore Heart Foundation. So I'm really grateful that you invited me and my organization to be here today. So for my topic, I'm actually going to share a bit more about trauma-informed care. It's a syllabus that was developed for the past 2-3 years. And we actually shared this syllabus in a more extended way to schools, to even businesses and corporates, and also to helping professionals like social service workers. Yeah, so I hope it will be beneficial to you all. Okay, so today I'm actually going to share about what is trauma, and I'd like you to hear about it and think about it in the sense of for yourself. So you as a helper, have you been through any trauma? And also, when you are helping another person, can you care for them in a trauma-informed way? Meaning, can you think about whether they have been traumatized and whether you need to think about their situation in a trauma-informed way? Okay? I will not be covering the adverse childhood experiences because I think the organizers shared that it may not be super relevant. I'll share a bit about the prevalence of trauma in Singapore, and also definitely I'll talk about trauma-informed care. So what are some aspects of trauma-informed care that maybe we have to keep in mind? Okay, so 3 things. If you can't remember anything that I say today, just remember these 3 things. The first one is the underlying question in helping anyone. So when we are in community, when we want to help someone, we want to understand them, we want to get into their world and hopefully provide some care, we always ask, what happened to you? Who are you? Okay, rather than come from a place of judgment. So the very automatic way that people usually think about it is, oh no, what is wrong here? But when we say what is wrong here, we are like labeling and we are putting a judgment there. So we want to hold back ourselves and come from a place of curiosity, a place of compassion, and also a place of like neutrality. So what happened to you? Second one, in a hospital or medical setting, sometimes we think about illness has certain symptoms. But in a community work setting, we don't think about illnesses and symptoms. We actually think about adaptations to traumatic events. So meaning that if we see someone who is acting up, or we see someone who's particularly agitated, or someone who is even like having a lot of social anxiety and not interacting, that is all their way of adapting to traumatic events that they have experienced in the past. So we want to take this mindset that all of us are capable, all of us are actually doing our best to cope in this situation. And whatever that we come up with, these are our coping mechanisms. We want to think of it as everyone is adapting the best that they can. Okay? The last one is very, very important. So healing happens in relationship. So sometimes people argue with me. They say, I can heal on my own. Or I just read self-help books. I can heal on my own. Okay? So in trauma-informed care, we want to highly, highly emphasize healing happens most concretely and most, in a way, permanently in relationship. So we need to be in relationship with one another. We need to be connected with one another so that we have people who are nurturing, supportive, and can help us in crisis. Okay? So healing always happens in relationship, and all of us here, we are capable of participating in our own and other people's healing. Okay, so can I see a raise of hands? Who has seen this Brené Brown video? Yeah, I think, not many, Okay, so this video, we have shared it many, many times over the past 3 years. But I think it still exists as something really a great video about the power of empathy, how you can actually connect with a person. So I'm just going to play it right now.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So yeah, rarely can a response actually make something better. Although, okay, in this particular situation, resuscitation does help. But connection is really important as well in emergency situations. And in this particular video, I'd like you to keep in mind one aspect of empathy, which is perspective taking. So in mental health, that is actually really important. I think in any crisis situation or in any situation of helping, there are 2 things that we usually keep in mind. One is, what is my job here? What do I need to do when I am here with the people I'm helping? And 2, how do they experience me, or how do they feel like? Yeah, so thinking about these 2 aspects can help us like ground ourselves in the situation, in the moment, to help us do our job better. Okay, so what is trauma? Okay, so there are different ways of thinking about trauma, but here we focus on individual trauma. And we say that it results from an event, series of events or set of circumstances. It is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and it has lasting adverse effects on a person, and not just in one area, but in all areas like functioning, mental, physical, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So I'm actually going to just share a bit more about why these 3 E's are important. So first, when we think about event, trauma happens from an event. And we want to remember this because we don't want to label a person going through trauma as someone who is weak, incapable, there must be something wrong with them, their family. No, okay? So we hold ourselves back that these are all not true, okay? So trauma always stems from an event or circumstance. So the person could have had a violent relationship, or they could have been from a poor family, or they could have been in Singapore where there might be some discrimination in certain aspects. Okay? So always trauma stems from an event or circumstances. Second is experience. So of course we know that 2 people can go through the same event, but one of them are traumatized, the other is not. Why is that? Because events and circumstances happen outside of us, but our experience is how we internalize the event. Okay, so experience again is a very important aspect to consider, and so a very simple example is two young boys. They may fail an important exam, but one is traumatized, the other is not. Right? So why is one boy traumatized but the other is not? Maybe in the family, perhaps a home that you go into to do your heart resuscitation work. I'm sorry, I do not know very much about that, but one son could be more favored over the other, and so that creates a certain dynamic in the situation that we probably should have some sensing about in how to handle the family situation. Okay. The third one is effects. So when we think about effects for trauma, we want to emphasize it's not just one singular aspect, but all areas of a person, because a person is holistic. So an example that I often give is that when we have a car accident, a family is in a car accident, in my own experience, the mother will actually come out and start to say, oh, are you okay? The children, are you physically hurt? Did your knees get scraped? Do you have any physical injury? But sometimes the car accident can also cause certain emotional, psychological trauma. Yeah. And it may be that the parents were arguing a lot before the car accident happened. So those are certain things that we need to keep in mind for trauma as well. Not just one aspect, let's say physical, but other aspects as well, like emotional, social, or that. Okay. So I won't overly talk about this, but so again, I'm going into events. Events, experience, and effects. So within each of these areas, there's actually a lot of things that we can discuss and explore a bit more. But just to say that various types of events can cause someone to be traumatized. It could be grief and loss, medical interventions, war and other forms of violence, abuse and neglect of all kinds, accidents and natural disasters. And the last one, maybe I will dwell a bit more on, is witnessing acts of violence, or even witnessing traumatic or challenging events in community. So in our line of work in mental health, we do see some students, for example, let's say they come to us because they are not wanting to go to school. They don't want to go back to their ITE. They see their grades failing, and they just kind of like shut down their life. And why is that the case? Sometimes as we talk to them a bit more, we realize that it was because that they witnessed acts of violence. So you may not be in the event itself, but you witness something that caused you to actually feel traumatized. Yeah, so some could be like in a university or ITE compound. They may witness a fellow student carrying a parang, hurting another student. And even though you yourself, you are not involved, but seeing that makes you feel like you have to care for your safety and you are feeling on high alert danger all the time. Yeah, so this might also happen in your context when you are helping people in community. I think earlier on over lunch I met some people who were doing the ambulance emergency business, and you actually work with IMH, Institute of Mental Health, and there are a lot of challenging patients there also that can cause certain trauma when you are working with them. Yeah, so just to also practice self-care and make sure that self-care is part and parcel of what makes you good at your work. Yeah, because we need to remember that aspect. Okay, and then for experience, when we try to empathize or understand a family or a situation, what are they going through? Generally, we think of these 4 questions. So how did it happen? So sometimes we think about, does the person who is going through the trauma feel like they were responsible for the trauma themselves? So in my context, very often we look at like sexual assault victims. So sometimes from an outsider perspective, we may think that it's very obvious there's a victim and a perpetrator, but to the victim themselves, they may confuse and they may feel like, oh, I am part of the problem as to why I got sexually assaulted. So whenever you feel that way, when when you mix up the cause and effect and you feel like you are part of the problem, you are part of the cause, actually the trauma experience becomes heightened and it becomes more serious in a way of your experience. And then for trauma, it's also, we often say that it's more serious as a child. And there are several reasons for that. One is that a child, they are still physically developing. Yeah, so they have not fully developed like an adult. And so when they experience stress and trauma, it actually delays their physical development. Yeah, so the brain may not fully develop as it normally should when they face trauma as a child. Another reason could also be that a child has lesser resources than an adult. They may be dependent on one or two caregivers, and if those two caregivers don't come through for them, they really have not very much else to depend on. Yeah, and the third reason that some people say is that a child is a blank slate. So when trauma happens to them, they actually do not know, is it trauma, is it right or wrong? Yeah, and so it becomes more serious when the trauma happens as a child. Yeah, we also need to think about safety in trauma-informed care and also in the helping in community. Safety is a huge aspect. We have, before any help or any intervention can take place, we have to ensure that is my presence helping you feel safe here? And only when we can establish this feeling of safety that any intervention can take place, whether it's like a physical resuscitation or whether it is actually a conversation, getting some help. Yeah, and of course what happened is contributes to the experience of trauma. Last one is effects. So we always want to emphasize the effect of trauma is a normal response to an abnormal situation, meaning that all of us are trying to adapt. So any kind of abnormal behavior or abnormal behavioral tics that we see in ourselves or other people, let's not say that it's weird or is something wrong with you. But let's think of it as an adaptation. All of us trying to adapt. Some of us adapt better than others. Some of our adaptations are more visible. Some adaptations are less visible. Yeah, so try to normalize it. Yeah, and effects have short and long-term effects. So I think all of us from time to time we feel overwhelmed. So that is actually a sign of being traumatized as well. However, most people, when they feel overwhelmed, they can quickly catch themselves and get back again. So that is really quite short term. Longer term, generally what we have learned is that if a trauma effects increase over time and it is more than, let's say, 1 month, then we highly encourage you or the people you are helping to seek professional help, like trauma specialists. Yeah, okay. And also to take note, in a way to learn how to be compassionate to the people in community and to ourselves as well. When we are facing people, let's take note that trauma in their life can affect their coping responses and ability to engage in relationships. So if you see someone who's maybe not engaging, so not very social adept, and they feel a bit awkward, you may need more time to help them ease into the social situation. Yeah, don't immediately label, but also just think of it that they had a hard time, and that's how they have been adapting and coping all this while. Okay. Okay, I don't have a Mentimeter, and I was actually going to ask questions, hoping that some of you might answer, but maybe I'll just speed along. I'll just say one of the questions I'd like you to start thinking about is, how does trauma look like to you in terms of noticeable behaviors and symptoms? Meaning that when you are in community, right, to know whether you need to help or not is to be able to see it first or to identify it first. So how do you know that someone actually needs help? Yeah, trauma and mental health very often is invisible. Okay, so just have a think. What looks wrong or what looks like I need to help here? Yeah. Would anyone want to raise hand and say something? Or I'll just try my luck. Okay, I'll just move on, okay? Okay, oh dear, the slides are all jumbled. Okay, so generally for mental health, when we think of signs of trauma responses, meaning things that we look out for to say that maybe there's something that we need to give more help here, there are three categories. Okay, one is behavioral. Okay, and when I think about behavioral, here there's some examples. So like blowing up when you are corrected or when you are gently corrected. Resisting change, very protective of your personal space, or reckless and self-destructive behavior. Okay, so all these things are behavioral. First of all, I want to say that doesn't mean that if you have if you display some of these means you are definitely traumatized. No, but it is a sign that we have to start to ask more or question more. Okay. So usually I like to think of behavioral signs in this way. A small trigger causing a disproportionate response. So maybe your mother just gently say, hey, you do something wrong, maybe you should do this in another way instead. But you as the daughter or the son, you like, what are you trying to say? Are you trying to say that I am not doing things right? Are you trying to accuse me of something? I really do not know what you might say. But so it's a small trigger causing a disproportionate response. That's when you realize, something might be off here. They may not actually get you from where you are coming from. They may pull something in from their past and have some other thing in their mind when you are gently correcting them. Okay, so that is behavioral. The second one is emotional physical. So we usually put together emotions and physical because they are very, very connected. Your emotions affect your physical, and then your physical also affects your emotions. You know, like when you go for a run, you naturally feel a bit better. Yeah, so in mental health, we always say about sleep. So sleep is very, very important, not just the quantity, how much you sleep, but also the quality of sleep. And also sensory. Okay, sensory is very important as well. So do you feel hypersensitive to things around you? Okay, that is probably not a good sign. Okay, it may be that you are extremely anxious or hypersensitive, hypervigilant to the things around you. And also mood swings. So all of us have it from time to time, but sometimes it can actually become very wide. You can experience mood swings in a very wide way, like maybe for people who have mania, like they start to spend a lot of money, that kind of thing. Okay, so it's almost like uncontrollable, emotional, physical. Last one is psychological. So psychological is very, very important as well. So one is, so there are just three, so I'm just going to go through all three. First one is confusing what is safe and what is dangerous. Yeah, so do you know who are the people safe to you and who are dangerous to you? Very often, sometimes youth may not know. Yeah, they may be confused because of the way they brought up, because of their environment. Second, of course, you have trouble focusing and concentrating. Again, this happens a lot in schools, but also at the workplace. Sometimes when at home you are having trouble with your wife or husband, and you just have a lot of issues back home, you have trouble focusing. And of course, the last one is also very important, difficulty imagining the future, meaning that do you feel hopeful for your life? Yeah, so this is something we can sense through conversation with people that are also important to take note of in a mental health way. Okay? And then, of course, there are factors increasing impact of trauma, so like early occurrence, being silenced or not believed, blaming or shaming, and the perpetrator as a trusted caregiver. So all these things, of course, when you are in the setting, in the community setting, helping someone, please, refrain from blaming and shaming. Please don't silence people in some sense. And take a more neutral perspective. And imagine you're like a diplomat or like you're a caregiver, and you just really want peace and harmony and helpfulness and caring in the setting. Something like that. And you are the facilitator. Okay? Okay, so now I'm going to start to share a bit more about what does trauma-informed care mean. Yeah, how do you actually practice it? Sometimes it might seem very airy-fairy to a lot of people, and there is, sorry the slides are all jumbled. I don't know why it doesn't show that way on my computer. So what is trauma-informed care? Again, there's a paragraph. I will read some of it and then I'll try to break it down for you. Okay, so trauma-informed care is a strengths-based framework. It's grounded in the understanding of and responsiveness to the impact of trauma. It emphasizes physical, emotional, psychological safety for both survivors and providers, meaning that your safety is important as well. And it creates opportunities for survivors and a sense of control and empowerment. Okay, so the underlined words are extremely important. First one, strengths-based. Okay, sometimes we overhear these words, so it loses its importance for us. But I want to emphasize, when you are helping someone, don't think that you are the one with all the strengths and resources. We also have to respect that the other person has dignity, has strengths, has resources, and sometimes those strengths and resources are closer to them than us. Yeah. So if you have any way to leverage their strengths and resources in their environment, that will be very, very helpful to them. Okay. And also another thing that I like to say is that, let's say when you see a homeless person on the street, right, and he seems like, wow, really jialat, like the life is like gone. What kind of life is that as a homeless person living on the street? But when we think of trauma-informed care, we want to say, no, that's not the right way of thinking about it. We have to start to say, this person, as hopeless as they seem, also has strengths and resources. So we force ourselves to say, this person has strengths and resources, and we start to find out what they are. And sometimes when we reflect it back to them, they are genuinely surprised because no one has seen the strength and resources in them before. So like a homeless person could be very loyal and very caring for their family. It's just that no one ever saw that in them before, for example. Okay? Earlier on, I shared a bit more about the 3 E's. It's really to try to help everyone get an understanding and also have some sense of how we can respond to the impact of trauma. Okay? The third one, safety. So safety, again, I want to emphasize, is very, very important in trauma-informed care and in community work. We have to ensure that our presence and our environment is making it safe for the person that we are trying to help. So safety is paramount, very important. Not just physical safety, but emotional. How do they feel that you are being here? And psychological, do they feel like you are imposing them in certain, or manipulating them in certain psychological ways? Okay, so always focus how you can provide more and more safety to yourself and to the other person. And last part, what we do in mental health work, we really try to create opportunities for the survivors, for the people who have experienced trauma, to get some sense of self-control, to get some sense of control and self-control, and empower them to do things. Yeah, sometimes it takes a lot of patience actually. Yeah, because when someone has experienced trauma, they may actually feel like they are no longer in control of their life, and they will just follow whatever anyone tells them. So to actually get them to start thinking, what do you want? What is best for you? What is best for your life? Sometimes it is a challenge. They will say, I don't know, I don't care, just tell me what to do. Yeah. But in a therapeutic setting, we really try to be patient and help them think slowly. What do they want? Yeah. So that is one aspect. So this is a bit of a test that I wanted to do. Can anyone tell me what is important in trauma-informed care? Any like keywords that maybe someone might be willing to throw out? I think no need, like if anyone raises their hand, I'll be... Okay, so I'll just share. Okay, it's like strengths-based, being understanding and responsiveness, safety, and also having a sense of empowerment and giving a sense of control back. Okay? So in practicing trauma-informed care, it does lower stress levels. It reduces the likelihood that people who have experienced trauma will be overwhelmed. So it's quite a win-win for everyone. And just remember this, okay? You don't have to be a therapist in order to be therapeutic, meaning that you all can do it. Yeah, you don't need a therapist to be around. You all can be therapeutic to your family members, to your friends, to your co-workers, all these people who matter to you, you can, okay? Okay, I'm going to skip this part. And then we come to the 4 R's. All these, I think you can Google it also, but I would like to maybe explain a bit more lah, okay? So this is about trauma-informed care and what are the steps in a way, or what are the aspects that we need to keep note of. First one is we must realize that actually there is a widespread impact of trauma. Okay, so just realize that, yeah, people around me, even the people close to me, they may experience some sense of being overwhelmed, stressed, they don't know how to cope. Okay, just realize that. Second one also is to recognize the signs of trauma in people. So earlier on I did mention behavioral, emotional, physical, and also psychological. Okay, so just start to think about those things. And after that, when you are able to identify, of course, we start to say that how do we respond then? How do we help the person? Okay, and then last one is to resist re-traumatization. So meaning if we know that some people are sensitive to certain subjects or they don't feel safe in certain areas, then let's not re-traumatize them. Let's keep away from those areas that actually make them feel unsafe. Okay. And then there are core principles in trauma-informed practice. So I'm just, again, briefly going to share about them. So first one is safety, physical, emotional, psychological safety, things that you can proactively do to ensure the safety of another person. Okay, so like how near or far you stand to them, what are the words that you use to address them, things like that. Being aware of the hierarchy in the situation also. Okay, second one, peer support. So again, if you have gone through something, likely you can help the other person, empathize with the other person who is going through a similar thing. Cultural issues. So cultural issues, generally we think about race, religion, all that. Okay, but actually cultural issues is not just that. Cultural issues is just a reminder to say, let's not make any assumptions. Yeah, so one thing in mental health, right, is that usually we think festivities are very happy occasions, like Chinese will like Chinese New Year, Christians will like Christmas, and so on. But actually in the mental health work, we realize that it's during these public holidays and festive occasions that we very often get the most calls for help. People are very traumatized by how past year festivities happen, and so they just sometimes people shut down also, they don't want to participate in these social events. So cultural issues just remind us to not make any assumptions lah. Okay? Collaboration and mutuality, always think of it as you are not the expert. The person you are helping is the expert of their own life, and whatever that you are doing actually is in collaboration with the other person. Okay? Empowerment, voice, and choice, again, is to empower that person to do as much as they can on their own, and not see you yourself as like the Superman, Superwoman, try to help everything. Yeah, because eventually that person has to live their own life, help themselves. So as much as possible, come alongside, help in very tangible ways, but also allow them to build their own voice and independence. And last one, trustworthiness and transparency. Very often it's about boundaries. Yeah, so just be aware of your own as well. So in helping another person, if you don't cross boundaries that actually make you feel traumatized or hurt, that will help you care for yourself. Yeah. Okay, last slide. Okay, principles of being trauma-informed. So this is really what does it take for an individual to practice being trauma-informed. And I think earlier on, Dr. Gabriel and also Minister of State Sun Xueling, like they also shared about how we need to have a certain mental resilience, and also like a way of thinking that helps us practice the muscle of being alert and crisis ready. Yeah, so these are some things that you can consider practicing in your everyday life. If you are already often being known as authentic, respectful, and compassionate, maybe you have been practicing trauma-informed care already without knowing. However, like a lot of us, we still need more practice. Yeah, so these are some ways that we can do it. The first one is, of course, mindset shift. Sometimes when I was learning about trauma-informed care, how I did it was in the morning, I'll say, okay, today I'm going to practice being trauma-informed and see how that changes my day. And suddenly you realize that being constantly attentive and caring to everyone you meet is actually quite challenging. Yeah, people will eventually press your trigger points or irritate you, but you still need to be constantly attentive and caring to them. So as you practice and try this, you just start to learn about yourself a lot more, self-awareness, and then you can eventually do that a lot better as you move along. Yeah, so trauma-informed care is really a way of being. All of us, we do not have the same way of being trauma-informed in some sense. All of us have different personality and different ways of being with other people, and they are all very precious and needed because different people need different types of people. But I think some of the major things that we can keep note of is just like respectfulness and of course compassion lah. Okay. Yeah, so again, this was a question that I wanted to pose to you all. So what would be for you yourself the greatest challenge in becoming trauma-informed? What would be the greatest challenge for you in becoming trauma-informed? Yeah, so again, if you can look at all these 7 items, you can start to think to yourself, which of these 7 items actually is the most challenging for you? Yeah. And that is actually a starting point because self-awareness is always a starting point, sorry. Okay, so I think that's about it. Thank you so much.